if I were the devil. If I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames.
When America falls, it won't be because of the liberal agenda, or it won't be because of the Republican agenda. It will be because of the ignorance of both parties and both people within their respective parties that refused to see the truth in light of their own political ideologies, which have blinded them from the truth. One of the patterns that we witnessed in 2020 was the ongoing division and rift between the Republicans and the Democratic Party. Now, I'm not going to sit up here and knock both parties for what they are and for what they stand for inherently, but one of the things that bothers me about people in both camps is that they tend to put their political ideologies and their political perspectives above the truth. I feel like there's nothing wrong with aligning yourself with a political party or aligning yourself with a certain ideology, but it becomes a problem when you do this to the point where it hinders you from seeing the truth, or it hinders you from being able to talk and start a conversation, which is the whole point of this channel. A lot of people like to label me, oh, well, you know, you're a Republican because you have Republican views, and honestly, I'm just like, no, I'm not a Republican. I am the conversation. Okay, and one question I would ask people who want to continuously put these political labels on people are, who are you outside of being a Republican? Who are you outside of being a Democrat? And this is the very thing that is going to drive America to its fall, because when America falls, you best believe it's not going to be because of some liberal agenda. It's not going to be because of some Republican agenda. It's going to be because of the ignorance of man that refuse to put aside their political differences, and they would rather build up their own truths, their own political ideologies, going after things that their own itching ears want to hear, instead of searching for the truth, instead of finding some common ground. I'm not knocking that the differences in society are inherently a bad thing. No, because I do believe it's differences in society that make up a great society. You know, there's nothing wrong with having a difference of opinion, but it becomes a problem when it has distracted you from the truth of what's happening in this country. That there are people in higher places that wish to put people up against one another. What about black versus white, or what about rich versus poor? You have to understand that all these factions, all these sections fall under basically the same category. You could take any social issue in America society today, whether it be black versus white, you can always put a label on it and say, well, it's Democrat versus Republican, or so the stereotype goes. Why do we have to label everything? And that's part of the problem too, is that we tend to put labels on everything. I'm a black man. People like to say, well, you talk white, or black people like to say you're an Uncle Tom because you don't do this, or you're this, or you're this. But notice everything that they call me, or everything that people have told me that I am, it's always a label. But that's part of the problem. What about who I am? What about who I am as an individual? What am I before I was black? Obviously I am black, but who am I outside of being that? Who am I outside of being what some people like to call a centrist? I guess that's what you would call me. I'm someone who goes along, who thinks critically. I'm not just a centrist. I'm not just an independent. I'm someone who thinks critically about the things going on in this world, instead of just always looking at it from a Democratic or from a Republican side, because there's so many things that I see where people just like to, oh, you know, the liberal agenda is going to do this. And yeah, obviously I see that there are the Democrats who have their agendas and there's the Republicans who have their agendas, but like I said, it won't be because of the agendas that is going to bring the country down. It'll be because the common enemy at the top is going to look at the two warring sides and say, yeah, a division. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And what we saw with the Capitol, and what we saw with all these things leading up into 2021 and things that will happen here on after, It's only going to unfortunately get worse from here because the rift is too wide. It's too broad. And that's what people have to understand. The point of the channel is so that we can put aside our differences, so you can figure out who you are outside of being a Democrat, outside of being a Republican. What were you and who are you outside of those things? Do not let these political parties define who you are. Even if you've made the choice willingly, I would just challenge some people who watch my videos to just acknowledge that yes, there are things going on in the world. Yes, there are things that may align with these certain parties, but outside of the parties, these are human issues. If you looked at the common denominator, humans are always at the bottom of it. We just like to say, well, we're better than them, or we're better than them. We do this differently. All we have to do is slap on a label, and subconsciously we have already said, well, I'm this kind of person. I'm a different type of person because I don't support this, or they support that, and I do things differently. It's labels like that that have subconsciously, I would say, barred us from really also taking responsibility as a human to say, you know what, maybe I should stop labeling myself. Maybe I should recognize that no, we are on equal footing here. I'm human just like you are. And yeah, like I said, personally, I don't think that if Trump stayed in office or Biden stayed in office, the country would have gotten really any better. Because as long as there is a divide in this country, especially with the way it is in America, as long as there is a divide like how it is right now, it's not going to grow. And that's what people have to understand. Look beyond your political parties. Look beyond what the government wants you to see. Look beyond that. Think critically for yourself. If I met a guy named Dave and I said, Dave, describe who you are to me, I don't want him to say, well, I'm a Republican. No. Who are you outside of being a Republican? Who are you? Who is Dave? Who is the conversation? I have personal ideals, personal ideologies, personal beliefs. I challenge you to figure out who you are beyond the political spectrum. And I'm speaking specifically to the people here in America, and this can also go towards people who are watching my channel from a different part of the world. However your political system works, who are you outside of what the government, these labels? And I'm not saying that the problem is the government, hear me. The problem is humans, and that's always been the problem. Humans overcomplicate things. We overcomplicate things. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat. We overcomplicate things. And it usually comes down to when you look closely for personal agendas. All the time. We overcomplicate things. But I would challenge you to think and to ask yourself, who am I outside of being a Democrat? Who am I? Who am I? Because as long as this cycle continues in this world, we're not going to get anywhere. And the same people who own all the corporations and the same elitists and all these people who are sitting at the very top, they're looking down and saying, yeah, these people are stupid. It's these labels of you are this, you are that. The problem lies is that these labels tend to have biases and stereotypes attached to them. While the majority of it may seem to be true, you see the problem. And I'm telling you, this isn't a Democratic channel. This isn't a Republican channel. This is a channel where we look at things and we critically think about things. Why is common sense considered conservatism? Why is common sense considered conservatism? What happened before we had these labels, Democratic and Republican? What did you call people back then? Traditional? Or just people who had common sense? People who thought critically about things? People who just looked at the facts? Why do facts and all these things have to align with a certain label and political party? And unfortunately, that's just the way the world has set it up. Looking at the inauguration, watching what Joe Biden said, like I said, Joe Biden's not going to save this country. Joe Biden's not going to destroy the country. It's going to be the ignorance of the American people on both sides that are going to destroy this country. And we all are at fault for it. The sooner people can learn to think critically outside of their own political parties, ideals, and outside of what the government wants them to think, that is the sooner we can begin to understand the real problems happening and have some common ground. But until that day, ladies and gentlemen, we're always going to be in this situation. Enough is enough. I may not know everything about political systems. I may not know everything about the intricacies of disenfranchised communities and all these other different things. I may not know all of that stuff. But sometimes things are much more simpler than we make them out to be. And that's just how humans are. We tend to overcomplicate things. And for what? Because I'm telling you guys, there's elitists out there who have plans for this world. The Great Reset isn't a joke. The Great Reset after COVID-19 is not a joke. So the reason why I make this video is to plead with people going into 2021 to challenge yourself to think about who you are outside of being a Republican, being a Democrat, or whatever, label you have put, or someone, or whatever, the government, whatever has put on you. Because the sooner you can take those labels off, and the sooner you can figure out who you are outside of what other people have, or what the world has already established for us. Because it's like the world is, you're born into this world, and if you don't fall into a certain category, then we gotta stop it. This is just a message that needs to be out there. We need to stop allowing the world to place labels on who we are. Who are you? And how long are you gonna let these labels get to you? To define us. Why do we have to be defined all the time? Why? Yes, it makes things easier for certain people to fall into certain categories, but like I said, that's just the problem. Categories usually end up with, with the whole us versus them mentality. People need to start thinking critically. This is a channel where we think critically. Like I said, Republicans and Democrats aren't going to save the world. They're not going to save America. It all boils down to the ignorance of man. Man, in our pursuit for following after things that we want to hear for our own, that suit our own personal agendas and biases, we have exchanged all of that. We have exchanged the truth for that. People don't see that. And honestly, it's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. Enough is enough. If America is going to change, it's going to start with the individual recognizing that it's not just about left or right, donkey or elephant, red or blue. The conversation. Thank you for listening.